Okay, let's unpack this. You know how sometimes you look at the headlines, the endless news cycles,
Mm.
and it just feels like trying to find a clear signal in, a hurricane of noise?
Absolutely. So much opinion, so many competing narratives.
Exactly. And it all seems designed to pull you into the drama rather than show you what's actually like happening beneath the surface. It's incredibly hard to see the core strategy, the underlying dynamics, when everything is sort of varnished with bias and just immediate reaction.
It gets obscured very easily.
So we needed a way to step back from that,
Yeah.
to apply a different kind of lens to these complex, high-profile situations that just dominate the conversation.
Right.
And the material we're diving into today offers just that, a structured framework, almost like putting the data through a different kind of filter.
And that framework is the Human AI Partnership Index, HAPI.
That's the one, HAPI.
Yeah.
What we learned from reviewing this material is that API is this multi-dimensional way to assess individuals, to see how they're positioned. Are they helping or maybe hindering the development of systems where human potential is like truly empowered by AI?
So it goes beyond just, say, charisma or how popular someone is.
Totally. It's about their fundamental approach to navigating complexity and collaboration in a world that's rapidly integrating artificial intelligence.
Okay.
So our mission for this deep dive is to take this API framework and apply it, just like the analysis we have does, to a really specific, very public situation. The recent interactions and the significant fallout between Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
And what's particularly insightful here, I think, is why looking at figures like Musk and Trump through this precise lens is so valuable. The analysis we've reviewed describes them almost like apex predators.
Apex predators, yeah.
Yeah, whose interactions do more than just generate clickbait headlines. They actually have the potential to reshape the entire ecosystem around them. Their actions carry significant weight, especially as we think about the future where humans and AI really must partner effectively.
That makes sense. It's bigger than just the two of them.
Right. And while the media often focuses on the immediate drama, the HAPI analysis, as presented in this material, provides a surprisingly sharp picture. It helps reveal insights, the undercurrents, that are simply not visible when you're only looking at the surface events through a traditional political or business lens.
Right. It's like a different perspective.
It's a distinct way to understand the underlying dynamics at play.
Exactly. And the goal here isn't just to analyze them per se, but to show you, the listener, how this kind of structured thinking can help you cut through that information overload yourself.
A tool for reading between the lines.
A tool for reading those undercurrents, yeah, for getting to a more informed understanding in a world that just feels incredibly noisy sometimes.
Yeah.
So let's really dive into the API framework itself and explore how this analysis applied it to the Musk-Trump dynamic.
Okay. So the framework analyzes individuals across 5 distinct domains, essentially assessing different facets of their approach to leadership and complex systems.
Right. And those 5 areas are cognitive growth, emotional well-being, social synergy, ethical maturity, and communication clarity. Let's maybe take them one by one and see what this analysis revealed.
Sounds good.
First up, let's look at cognitive growth. This domain, as explained in the analysis, is all about how someone thinks beyond, the immediate moment.
So foresight, adaptability.
Yeah, exactly. It's their ability to anticipate future needs, to adapt rapidly when circumstances change, and to recalibrate their approach based on new information. Think of like a chess grandmaster planning many moves ahead, but also being able to completely change strategy if their opponent does something unexpected.
Okay, that dynamic adaptability.
Right. This kind of dynamic adaptability is highlighted as absolutely essential for leaders in today's complex, interconnected world, especially one integrating AI.
Makes sense. So on this domain, the analysis gives Elon Musk a score of 7.1 out of 10.
7.1, okay. Why so high?
Well, the primary driver for this score, according to the material, was his very public decision to step away from the Department of Government Efficiency Council under Trump.
Ah, right. I remember that.
And the analysis frames this departure not merely as like a political move, but as a signal, a divergence, indicating a return towards principles of merit, independence, and distributed innovation, rather than just centralized control.
Interesting framing.
Yeah, the language used to describe his behavior here is fascinating. It's compared to acting like an AI system that thrives on adaptive learning loops, almost like, and this is a quote, an open source model tweaking its own weights mid-flight.
Wow. Tweaking its own weights mid-flight. That's a vivid analogy.
It really is. It highlights a fundamental capacity to learn and pivot based on feedback, which the analysis sees as absolutely key for future leadership.
That analogy really suggests a fundamental, like, built-in adaptability.
Mm.
Okay, so now, for Donald Trump, the analysis presents a different picture for cognitive growth, scoring him at 5.6 out of 10.
5.6, so lower.
Yeah, lower. The core pattern identified here is one of centralizing loyalty above, maybe expertise, and punishing any form of deviation or dissent. According to the analysis, his approach treats feedback not as something to learn from, but almost as a personal threat.
Mm.
The material argues that in a world increasingly structured by AI-enhanced systems, this kind of rigidity is incredibly costly. The analogy used is quite vivid, too. It's like trying to use last season's playbook in a new league game.
Right, last season's playbook.
Why does the analysis see that specific rigidity as so detrimental in this new league? What's the connection to AI?
Well, because AI systems are fundamentally built on data, on feedback loops, and on continuous optimization. So leaders who mirror that in their own cognitive approach,
Right.
welcoming data, adapting to feedback, remaining flexible, they're just better equipped to navigate and leverage those systems.
Okay, so rigidity clashes with how AI works.
Exactly. Rigidity, shutting out feedback, demanding blind loyalty that creates brittle systems, not resilient ones. So the analysis concludes on this domain that Musk scores higher precisely because his actions, in this instance, and maybe more generally, demonstrate a greater capacity for that essential adaptive learning required in these complex dynamic environments.
That makes a lot of sense. Adaptability isn't just a nice to have. It sounds foundational for interacting with these, well, self-improving systems.
Precisely.
Okay, let's move on to the second domain then, emotional well-being. The analysis we reviewed describes emotional trust as the invisible thread, which I like, holding human AI ecosystems together.
The invisible thread, yeah.
Without that thread, stress and uncertainty can corrode innovation, and collaboration just breaks down. So this domain measures a leader's impact on that crucial emotional infrastructure.
Right. So for Elon Musk on emotional well-being, the analysis gives a score of 5.9 out of 10.
5.9, a bit lower than cognitive growth. Why?
Well, the material notes his distinctive and, let's say, often provocative communication style, his tweets, his public commentary, including some controversial mentions of certain figures or even, public statements referencing threats related to his space company's operation.
Ah, yes. The volatility.
Exactly. While it might be energizing for some, the analysis points out that this approach undeniably injects significant volatility into already high-pressure environments. Trust in leadership, according to the analysis, isn't some peripheral concern. It's actually part of the core infrastructure and emotional well-being within these systems.
Large infrastructure.
And the analysis suggests this is, and I quote again, a code Musk sometimes corrupts due to the unpredictable emotional impact of his actions.
Okay, so volatility is the key factor there. What about Donald Trump for this domain? The analysis scores him slightly higher at 6.3 out of 10.
6.3, that's interesting. Higher than Musk here.
Yeah, slightly. The reasoning presented is that Trump's public persona is built on a form of, well, predictable chaos. His audience, and perhaps the wider public, has become somewhat desensitized to the bluster and disruption.
Right, you sort of know what to expect, even if it's chaos.
Exactly. The analysis finds this makes him, perhaps counterintuitively, slightly more stable in the consistency of his emotional impact. However, and this is important, the material is careful to add a significant caveat, stating that stability in dysfunction is a dubious virtue.
Stability and dysfunction, that phrase really stands out.
It does, doesn't it? Can you elaborate on what the analysis means by stability and dysfunction?
Sure. It essentially means that while his emotional impact might be consistently chaotic or provocative, the analysis doesn't view that consistency as actually beneficial for building healthy, productive systems. It's a form of stability, only in that, what to expect, more drama, more confrontation, but that stability is rooted in dysfunction, not in fostering trust or calm.
Which the analysis suggests are vital for these human AI systems.
Exactly, vital for collaborative, innovative human AI systems. So while Trump scores narrowly higher due to that predictability, the analysis emphasizes that it's definitely not an endorsement of his leadership style. It's merely an observation on the consistency of his emotional impact.
So it raises that question. What kind of emotional impact actually serves the goal of building resilient systems?
That's the core question it leaves you with.
Yeah, okay, that provides crucial context. It's not just about being predictable, but what the nature of that predictability is.
Got it.
Got it. Moving on to the third domain, social synergy. The analysis we read uses a fantastic analogy here, comparing this domain to a beehive. The strength isn't solely in the individual bees or even the queen, it's in the cohesion and connectivity of the entire network.
The hive mind concept, almost.
Kind of. Social synergy measures whether a leader's actions build or break that collective web, which is, increasingly crucial in these networked AI environments.
Okay, so for Elon Musk's social synergy, the analysis scores him at 6.0 out of 10.
6.0. So middle of the road, how did they break that down?
Well, his exit from Trump's orbit certainly severed a very high-profile political alliance. That's undeniable.
True.
However, the analysis argues that this move simultaneously positions him closer to more global, perhaps a more decentralized innovation efforts. It's framed not just as losing a connection, but potentially joining a smarter swarm.
A smarter swarm. Interesting.
Yeah, suggesting a realignment towards networks may be more conducive to future AI development. The material also notes that his demonstrated ability to quickly realign with other groups and projects sort of softens the blow of leaving that previous alliance.
Okay, so adaptability plays in here too. And for Donald Trump in this domain, the analysis scores him lower at 5.4 out of 10.
5.4. Why lower?
The reasoning presented is that his approach, characterized by what the analysis calls zero-sum loyalty politics and demands for personal allegiance, tends to weaken relationships and alliances, particularly in the tech and innovation space.
So it discourages collaboration.
The analysis suggests this behavior discourages independent innovation leaders from aligning publicly with him, which over time can shrink his influence and, critically, according to the material, jeopardize the kind of public-private collaborations needed for effective AI-informed policymaking.
Okay, that makes sense from a network perspective. So the analysis concludes Musk scores higher on social synergy here.
That's right. The summary phrase used is quite memorable. He loses a bridge, but keeps his compass.
Loses a bridge, but keeps his compass.
It suggests that while specific connections might be broken, his overall trajectory remains oriented towards building the kinds of networks that the analysis deems important for the future.
Got it. That paints a clear picture.
Okay, let's look at the fourth domain. Ethical maturity. As the analysis points out, this isn't about whether someone is, ethically perfect. Nobody is.
Right, it's more nuanced than that.
It's about transparency, a sense of stewardship for systems larger than oneself, and a commitment to responsible development, which is just profoundly important in the AI age where power and information are increasingly amplified.
Absolutely critical. So for Elon Musk on ethical maturity, the analysis gives a score of 6.4 out of 10.
6.4. How do they justify that one? He seems complex ethically.
He is, and the analysis describes his profile here as complex. On one hand, he actively challenges opaque power structures, he promotes open source technologies, which can increase transparency, and he often engages publicly in debates about AI ethics and its potential risks.
Okay, those are positives in this framework.
Right. However, the analysis also notes his tendency to, weaponize information or engage in public confrontations that venture into what it calls ethically hazardous terrain, like those controversial mentions we touched on earlier.
Right.
The analysis uses the striking phrase that he sometimes treats ethics like an engineering problem, solvable with shock and awe.
Ethics as an engineering problem solvable with shock and awe.
Wow. Yeah, suggesting an approach focused on disruption rather than maybe traditional ethical deliberation.
That's a really unique perspective.
Right.
Okay, now for Donald Trump, the analysis scores him lower at 5.2 out of 10 in ethical maturity.
5.2.
And the reasoning.
The reasoning presented focuses on his use of power, which the analysis describes as deeply transactional. The material explicitly mentions examples like referencing potential audits of perceived opponents or demanding loyalty pledges from government officials.
Okay.
This approach is framed as using the state apparatus as a cudgel, not compass.
A cudgel, not a compass. Strong words. Yeah. And the analysis highlights why this is particularly damaging in the context of AI. Because trust in leadership and the institutions they control can be algorithmically reflected and amplified or diminished within AI-driven systems.
Okay, can you expand a little on what the analysis means by trust being algorithmically reflected? That sounds important.
Sure. It essentially means that the perceived trustworthiness of a leader or an institution isn't just a human feeling anymore,
Right, it gets embedded in the tech.
Exactly. It can be built into the very algorithms of power systems, deciding who gets access to information, how data is prioritized, which actions get flagged. So if a leader erodes trust through these transactional or punitive uses of power, that lack of trust can become embedded in the digital systems they oversee.
which could lead to biased outcomes or system breakdowns.
Potentially, yeah. Or at least a breakdown in systemic function. So using power like a cudgel is seen as damaging that fundamental trust layer that future AI systems will really rely on to operate effectively and equitably.
Okay, that connection between leadership ethics and the actual fabric of AI systems is a powerful insight from this analysis.
Definitely. All right, we're on to the final API domain, communication clarity. As the analysis we reviewed emphasizes, communication is absolutely essential because AI systems learn, in part, from the vast amounts of human interaction and data we feed them.
Right, the input matters.
Immensely. Clarity isn't just a courtesy. It's described as a code that these systems interpret and propagate.
A code, okay. So on communication clarity, the analysis scores Elon Musk at 6.0 out of 10.
6.0 has his code.
Well, his communication style is likened to a jazz musician.
A jazz musician, okay.
Yeah, it's described as having, brilliant moments of improvisation and maybe some erratic riffs. However, the analysis argues that even within that unpredictability, there's often a recognizable underlying theme or vision centered around things like autonomy, innovation, and curiosity.
So a method to the madness, perhaps.
Perhaps. While this style can sometimes cause confusion, the analysis suggests it also has the potential to spark inquiry and debate, which can actually be beneficial in complex systems seeking novel solutions.
Okay, that jazz musician analogy does capture the feel. And for Donald Trump on communication clarity, the analysis gives him a score of 5.3 out of 10.
5.3, lower again.
Yeah. The description here is that he tends to speak in predictable loops and often resorts to simple, repetitive phrasing.
Which can be effective for rallying.
Very effective for rallying a base audience, the analysis finds. But it's seen as less effective for fostering nuanced dialogue or building the complex, interconnected systems required for the future.
Okay.
The analysis's framing is that his communication doesn't build ecosystems. It builds arenas. And crucially, the analysis adds, arenas don't scale into networks.
Arenas don't scale into networks. That's a key distinction.
It really is.
Yeah. The analysis points out that systems built on clear, multidimensional communication can scale and connect, forming robust networks. Communication that primarily serves to create these kind of insular arenas for a specific audience, even if it's effective for that purpose, just doesn't lend itself to building those broader, adaptable networks needed for human-AI partnership.
So the conclusion there.
The analysis concludes that Musk's score is higher here, describing his communication as unfiltered but multidimensional, suggesting it holds more potential for contributing to that code that future systems learn from.
Okay. We've walked through all 5 domains now, using this HAPI framework to look beyond just the surface-level drama. The analysis we've reviewed also provides a final scorecard, right? Consolidating these domain scores.
That's right. Looking at the final breakdown, Elon Musk's total HAPI score from this analysis comes out to 6.3.
6.3 overall for Musk and Trump.
Donald Trump's total HAPI score from this same analysis is 5.6.
5.6, so Musk ahead by a bit according to this index.
According to this index, yes. The overall conclusion presented in the material is that, based on this specific HAPI analysis, Elon Musk emerges as the more analytically adaptive and systemically relevant player in this particular dynamic.
Even with the complexities noted.
Even acknowledging the messiness discussed in areas like emotional well-being and ethical maturity, yeah. His actions are seen as reflecting a more fundamental commitment to learning, to recalibration, and to engaging, even if disruptively, with ethical questions.
And Trump's approach.
Trump's approach, while undeniably effective in generating that emotional connection with his base, is seen by the analysis as increasingly out of sync with the core demands of future systems integrating AI. Systems that, according to this framework, require feedback, flexibility, trust, and the ability to build broad networks. The analysis leaves us with a pretty powerful final thought on leadership in the AI age. Real progress, the kind that matters for the future, requires leaders who truly understand that it's made by partnering with the future and its complexities, not by, fighting against them with outdated playbooks or fragmented systems.
Right. Partnering, not fighting. So what does this all mean for you, the listener?
Well, we spent this deep dive exploring how applying a structured framework like API can help you look past the headlines and, frankly, the noise. It allows you to see underlying dynamics and strategic positioning that are often completely hidden by the surface-level drama and all the opinions layered on top.
And it's really important to reiterate, as the analysis does, that this isn't about predicting political outcomes or endorsing one individual over another. That's not the point at all.
No, absolutely not. It's about using a different analytical lens to understand what qualities, according to the specific framework, might be more or less conducive to successfully navigating the incredibly complex future where humans and AI must partner effectively to solve, big global challenges.
For us, this kind of structured analysis is exactly what these deep dives are all about. It's a tool, really, to help cut through that feeling of information overload, to find those aha moments that stick with you, and to become more genuinely well-informed in a world that often feels designed to keep you distracted.
Yeah. And this raises a fascinating question for you to consider, doesn't it? If the demands of an AI-integrated future truly prioritize adaptability, the building of trust and strong networks, and a commitment to systemic thinking, well, what does that suggest about how we should evaluate leadership?
In any field,
Yeah.
right, not just politics.
Exactly. In business, in government, in our communities going forward, how can you train your own eye to look beyond the immediate news cycle for these deeper systemic indicators?
It really does change how you might think about what effective leadership looks like in the 21st century, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Using frameworks like API can unlock a deeper understanding of the forces shaping our world. If you're interested in learning more about the specific analysis we discussed today, you can find a link to the source material right there in the description for this deep dive.